How's it going, fellow Detroit Red Wings fans? So, the Red Wings have gotten through the first half of the season and are in okay shape. They are teetering between being over and under a .500 point percentage, and while they aren't currently in a playoff spot, they aren't necessarily way out of the race. While that's great, the Red Wings are obviously starting to eye the NHL trade deadline. With Yzerman's trading history, plus this new position the Red Wings find themselves in, it is bound to be an interesting and exciting trade deadline. But before we get too far into today's video, I want to give a shout out to Tim Doyle. We hit the 1,000 subscriber mark a little bit ago, and we want to start to thank you guys for making the Red Wing Nation community a community. So if you want to get a shout out, make sure you subscribe and join lots of other fans of this great team and sport. So back to the trade deadline. We are going to break this up, talking about the trade baits and what they could possibly fetch for the Red Wings. And in a later video, we will be looking at trade targets, who the Red Wings could aim to acquire, and finally some mock trades. So let's distinguish one thing. Are the Detroit Red Wings buyers or sellers? It's the biggest question surrounding this team this season, aside from are the Red Wings going to make the playoffs? They are not at the bottom of the standings, so they don't necessarily want to be selling good players for draft picks and prospects. But they definitely aren't in a spot where they want to be trading away prospects and or picks for older players or temporary players. So what are they? The best way to answer this is that the Red Wings are trying to increase value. Meaning if a team wants a high draft pick and or a prospect, that's fine. We're open for business, but you're going to have to pay. A playoff team wants a veteran? Sure, but they are going to have to pay. Yzerman should and will be taking calls for anything and anyone except for Larkin, Bertuzzi, Raymond, Seider, Edvinsson, and Kosa. So with all the players and prospects at play, who are the top trading chips and what could they fetch? Starting off this is going to be a forward who is having a great year, great utility player to be played in all roles, Vladislav Nemestikov. The Detroit Wings signed Nemestikov in the 2020 offseason to a 2-year, $4 million contract. Nemestikov is 29 and has played with a multitude of teams, from bottom feeders to contenders, playing anything from a bottom 6 role to a top line guy. With loads of experience and different skill sets, plus a cheap contract that could be made cheaper if Detroit retains some salary, any team looking to add some quality depth talent while also being strapped against the cap would salivate at a player an opportunity like this. Especially because Nemestikov is having a good year. 11 goals, 9 assists for 20 points in 42 games played, not to mention tied for 6th on the team in plus minus, meaning he is also defensively responsible, which is ever so important come playoff time. So what should Yzerman be looking for? Well, supply and demand means Nemestikov's price is going to be high, and Yzerman knows this, but he's still a depth player, not really a top 6 forward. My guess is a 2nd round pick or a B-rated prospect. Overall, not a big haul, but could be a good starter for trade talks. So, speaking of veterans, this one could also be a good trade bait. We acquired him last offseason to be a mentor for Moritz Seider when he stepped into the league. This is of course Nick Leddy. Now, as history would have it, Seider didn't really need the mentoring. He's playing top line minutes and is probably the best defenseman the Red Wings have had since Cronwall fell out of his prime. Regardless, he is not a mentor to Seider anymore, but still has loads of playoff experience, along with the fact he has been a top 4 defenseman on really good teams for most of his career. The only downside is Leddy is in a down year and has a high cap hit. Sure, the Red Wings could retain some salary, his contract expires this season, but I doubt there will be teams lining up for his services. I don't think he's likely to be traded as much as others, given how much experience he can pull from to help out the young defensemen and young players really on the Red Wings roster. My guess is around a 3rd or 4th round pick in exchange for Leddy. So let's switch things up to a prospect. He has yet to make his NHL debut. I'm not saying he is on Yzerman's trade list, but he is in kind of an expendable position. And he also has what lots of other teams want. So if I'm Yzerman, I'd be listening, seeing what team is willing to overpay for a big, smooth skating defenseman. We are talking about William Wallander. While Wallander is a left-handed defenseman and the Red Wings defensive lineup right now on the left-hand side is weaker and older, they have prospects pretty close to filling those spots, with Edvinsson looking like a top-level defensive prospect, then Johansson, who isn't necessarily elite, but should be an easy top 4 defenseman once in the NHL, and then of course Sebrango, who should really seal off the bottom line. He's proven to be effective defensively, already being trusted with big minutes in Grand Rapids, especially for his age. So even though he is really talented and would help the Red Wings become more competitive, he is more of a luxury than a necessity. Plus, he's had a really good season in the SHL with 12 points in 27 games played, and has the 3rd best plus-minus for defensemen on his team. His price would at least start with a first-round pick, along with an offensive prospect. Especially considering the Red Wings don't have to trade him, the rebuild will continue and be great, regardless of whether or not this trade goes through or not. But once again, it's about adding value. If a team wants to pay a high price, then so be it. It only helps us. So bringing it back to the main roster, we have a veteran goaltender who could also be getting traded. Thomas Greiss. Greiss was brought in with the same free agent class as Nemestikov. Last season, partnered up with Bernier, he did well and really did come into his own later on. This season with Nedeljkovic, it's been rough. Hovering usually just below a .900 save percentage, but make no mistake, Greiss is a good goaltender. In every deadline, there's always teams looking for a spare goaltender, especially ones with a good history, for when they go on a deep playoff run. Greiss is perfect for that. Sure, we would have to call up another goalie to fill his spot, but Pickard is waiting and should be a fine backup, and Nedeljkovic has more than come into his own in Detroit. My guess is, depending on the goalie market, probably a 3rd round pick for Greiss. Could be more depending on if Greiss picks up his play heading into the trade deadline. Now, the last one is a big one. I really do want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. He's a big name. He was once considered a cornerstone of the rebuild and the future star of our offense. We are, of course, talking about the Czech, Filip Zadina. While I'm not saying he is a bust, the young forward has struggled to find a spot in the lineup, and a change of scenery might help. The only problem is Zadina's price is going to be high. I mean, he is a really good player, no doubt, and will have a good career. But will a team be willing to pay a hefty price for Zadina? Most likely they would have to have a good prospect in the same position where they are supposed to be really good, but have just struggled to find a spot on their team. So most likely a first with a B-rated prospect, or an A-rated prospect with a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, something around that value. What do you guys think? Who is on the trading block? Do you guys agree with our list? Let us know down below. Red Wing Nation was designed to be a community of Red Wings fans that could come together and talk about all things Red Wings. If you like this video, make sure you drop a like. That way we make more content that you like. And lastly, if you're a hockey fan, if you're a Red Wings fan, you're just a great person, make sure you subscribe and join lots of other great fans of this team in sports. And until next time, lights on the Red Light District.